The Oval Office is the formal working space of the President of the United States. Part of the Executive Office of the President of the United States, it is in the West Wing of the White House, in Washington, D.C. The Oval Room has 3 large south lawn-facing windows, in front of which the President's desk traditionally stands, and a fireplace at the north end. 2 built-in bookcases are recessed in the western wall. There are 4 doors. The east door opens to the Rose Garden, the west door leads to a private study and dining room, the northwest door opens onto the main corridor of the West Wing, and the northeast door opens to the office of the President's secretary. Presidents generally decorate the office to suit their own personal tastes, choosing furniture and drapery and often commissioning oval carpets. Artwork is selected from the White House collection, or borrowed from museums for the President's term. The Oval Office has become associated in Americans' minds with the presidency itself through memorable images, such as a young John F. Kennedy, Jr. peering through the front panel of his father's desk, President Richard Nixon speaking by telephone with the Apollo 11 astronauts during their moonwalk, and Amy Carter bringing her Siamese cat Misty Malarkey Yin Yang to brighten her father President Jimmy Carter's day. Several presidents have addressed the nation from the Oval Office on occasion. Examples include Kennedy presenting news of the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, Nixon announcing his resignation from office, 1974, one Ronald Reagan following the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, 1986, 2 and George W. Bush in the wake of the September 11 attacks, 2001. 3. The White House was not ready for occupancy until 1800. George Washington never occupied the White House. He spent most of his presidency in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which served as the temporary national capital for 10 years, from 1790 to 1800, while Washington, D.C., a new city, was under construction. In 1790, Washington built a large, 2-story, semicircular addition to the rear of the President's house in Philadelphia, creating a ceremonial space in which the public would meet the President. Standing before the 3 windows of this bow window, he formally received guests for his Tuesday afternoon audiences, delegations from Congress and foreign dignitaries, and the general public at open houses on New Year's Day, the 4th of July, and his birthday. Washington received his guests, standing between the windows in his back drawing room. The company, entering a front room and passing through an unfolding door, made their salutations to the President, and turning off, stood on one side. President John Adams occupied the Philadelphia mansion from March 1797, and used the bow window in the same manner as had his predecessor. Curved foundations of Washington's bow window were uncovered during archaeological excavation of the site of the President's house in 2007. They are exhibited under glass at the President's House Commemoration, next to the Liberty Bell Center. In November 1800, John Adams became the first president to occupy the White House. He and his successor, President Thomas Jefferson, used Hoban's Oval Rooms as Washington had used his bow window salon, standing before the 3 windows at the south end to receive guests. In the 19th century, some presidents used the White House's second-floor yellow Oval Room as their private offices and libraries. This cultural association, between the president and an Oval Room, was more fully expressed in the Taft Oval Office, 1909, in the West Wing. The West Wing was the idea of President Theodore Roosevelt, brought about by his wife's opinion that the second floor of the White House, then shared between bedrooms and offices, should be solely a domestic space. Completed in 1902, the 1-story Executive Office building was intended to be a temporary structure, for use until a permanent building was erected there or elsewhere. 11 sitting the building west of the White House allowed the removal of a vast, dilapidated set of pre-Civil War greenhouses, which had been erected by President James Buchanan. 12. Roosevelt moved the offices of the executive branch into the newly constructed wing in 1902. His workspace was a 2-room suite of executive office and cabinet room, occupying the eastern third of the building. Its furniture, including the president's desk, was designed by an architect, Charles Follen McKim, and executed by A. H. Davenport and Company, both of Boston. 13. Now much altered, the 1902 Executive Office survives as the Roosevelt Room, a windowless interior meeting room, diagonally opposite the Oval Office. President William Howard Taft made the West Wing a permanent building, doubling its size by expanding it southward, and building the first Oval Office. Designed by Nathan C. Wyeth and completed in 1909, the office was centered on the building's south facade, much as the Oval Rooms in the White House are. Taft wanted to be more involved with the day-to-day operation of his presidency, and intended the office to be the hub of his administration. The Taft Oval Office had ample natural light from its 3 windows and skylight. It featured a white marble mantel, simple Georgian Revival woodwork, and twin glass-doored bookcases. It also was likely the most colorful presidential office in history. Its walls were covered with vibrant seagrass green burlap. On December 24, 1929, during the first year of President Herbert Hoover's administration, a fire severely damaged the West Wing. Hoover used this as an opportunity to create additional space, excavating a partial basement for staff offices. He restored the Oval Office, upgrading the quality of trim and installing air conditioning. He also replaced the furniture, which had undergone no major changes in 20 years. Dissatisfied with the size and layout of the West Wing, President Franklin D. Roosevelt engaged New York architect Eric Gugler to redesign it in 1933. To create additional staff space without increasing the apparent size of the building, Gugler excavated a full basement, added a set of subterranean offices under the adjacent lawn, and built an unobtrusive penthouse story. The directive to wring the most office space out of the existing building was responsible for its narrow corridors and cramped staff offices. Gugler's most visible addition was the expansion of the building eastward for a new cabinet room and Oval Office. The modern Oval Office was built at the West Wing southeast corner, offering Roosevelt, who was physically disabled and used a wheelchair, more privacy and easier access to the residence. He and Gugler devised a room architecturally grander than the previous 2 offices, with more robust Georgian details, doors topped with substantial pediments, bookcases set into niches, a deep bracketed cornice, and a ceiling medallion of the presidential seal. Rather than a chandelier or ceiling fixture, the room is illuminated by light bulbs hidden within the cornice that wash the ceiling in light. In small ways, hints of Art Moderne can be seen, in the sconces flanking the windows and the representation of the eagle in the ceiling medallion. Roosevelt and Gugler worked closely together, often over breakfast, with Gugler sketching the president's ideas. One notion resulting from these sketches that has become fixed in the layout of the room's furniture is that of 2 high back chairs in front of the fireplace. The public sees this most often with the president seated on the left and a visiting head of state on the right. This allowed Roosevelt to be seated, with his guests at the same level, de-emphasizing his inability to stand without help. Construction of the modern Oval Office was completed in 1934. The basic Oval Office furnishings have been a desk in front of the 3 windows at the south end, a pair of chairs in front of the fireplace at the north end, a pair of sofas, and assorted tables and chairs. The neoclassical mantel was made for the Taft Oval Office in 1909 and salvaged after the 1929 West Wing fire. A tradition of displaying potted Swedish ivy, Plectranthus verticillus, atop the mantel goes back to the administration of John F. Kennedy, and the current plants were rooted from the original plant. A Federal long case clock, made in Boston by John and Thomas Seymour c. 1795–1805, commonly known as the Oval Office grandfather clock, was purchased by the White House Historical Association in 1972, and has stood next to the Oval Office's northeast door since 1975. President Harry S. Truman replaced the Oval Office's 23-year-old dark green carpet in 1947. He had revised the seal of the President of the United States after World War II, and his blue-gray carpet incorporated the 1945 revised seal, represented monochromatically through varying depths of its cut pile. The Truman carpet remained in the office through the Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy administrations. Jacqueline Kennedy's redecoration of the Oval Office began on November 21, 1963, while she and President Kennedy were away on a trip to Texas. The following day, November 22, a red carpet was installed, just as the Kennedys were making their way through Dallas, where the president was assassinated. Johnson had the red carpet removed and the Truman carpet reinstalled, and used the latter for his administration. Since Johnson, most administrations have created their own oval carpet, working with an interior designer and the curator of the White House. 6 desks have been used in the Oval Office by U.S. presidents since its construction in 1909. The desk usually sits in front of the south wall of the Oval Office, which is composed of 3 large windows. Some presidents only use the desk in this room for ceremonial purposes, such as photo opportunities and press announcements, while others use it as their main workspace. The first desk used in the Oval Office was the Theodore Roosevelt desk, and the desk currently in use by Joe Biden is the Resolute desk. Of the 6 desks used in the Oval Office, the Resolute desk has spent the longest time there, having been used by 8 presidents in the room. The Resolute has been used by all U.S. presidents since 1977 with the exception of George H.W. Bush, who used the C&O desk for his one term, making it the shortest-serving desk to date. Other past presidents have used the Hoover desk, the Johnson desk, and the Wilson desk. The Resolute desk, the current desk in use, is built from oak timbers that were once part of the ship HMS Resolute. The British Resolute was trapped in Arctic ice in 1854 and abandoned. The ship was discovered in 1855 by an American whaling ship and later underwent a complete refit, repaint, and restock paid for by the United States government. It was returned to England in 1856 and decommissioned in 1879. The same year the British Admiralty launched a competition to design a piece of furniture made from the timbers of the Resolute which Queen Victoria could give to the American president. Following a design competition, Queen Victoria ordered that 3 desks be made from the timbers of Resolute. The one that is now known as the Resolute desk was designed by Morant, Boyd, and Blandford, built by William Evenden at Chatham Dockyard, and announced as recently manufactured on November 18, 1880. The desk was delivered as a gift to President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1880. President Franklin D. Roosevelt requested that a panel be installed in the knee hole during his presidency. The desk was used in various areas of the White House until Jacqueline Kennedy had it moved to the Oval Office in 1961. Following the 1963 assassination of President Kennedy, the Resolute desk was transferred, on loan, to the Smithsonian Institution and went on tour around the country to help raise funds for the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. After this tour, the desk was put on view at the Smithsonian Institution beginning in 1966. Jimmy Carter returned the Resolute desk to the Oval Office in 1977. The Oval Office has been the main office for the president since President William Howard Taft began working in it in October 1909. After his inauguration, President Taft held a competition to select an architect to enlarge and make permanent the West Wing's temporary executive office built during Theodore Roosevelt's administration. Taft ordered a southward extension of the existing structure. The winning architect was Nathan C. Wyeth of Washington, D.C., who designed the expansion and a new office for the president. Wyeth modeled the new president's office after the White House's most famous oval-shaped room, the Blue Room. Before moving to the President's house in Philadelphia in late 1790, George Washington ordered that the straight rear walls of the house be rebuilt into a semicircular form. These bowed walls may be the inspiration for the oval shape of the Blue Room, as the room on the first floor was considered the state dining room for President Washington. This distinctive shape apparently had been preferred by Washington to create a suitable space for a formal reception known as a levee. Washington's desire for an oval-shaped room may have also found its way into architect James Hoban's winning design for the White House, selected in July 1792. A month earlier, the two men met at the president's house in Philadelphia, and while there is no known documentation of their conversation, they most likely discussed architectural ideas and preferences, as well as the task at hand building a new national capital on the Potomac River. The levee, a tradition that evolved from the English court, was an occasion to allow men of prominence to meet the president. Replete with formal dress, silver buckles, and powdered hair, the event was a stiff public ceremony almost military-like in its starkness and sense of hierarchy. Invited guests entered the room and walked over to the president standing before the fireplace, bowing as a presidential aide made a low announcement of their names. The visitor then stepped back to his place. After 15 minutes, the doors were closed and the group would have assembled in a semicircle. The president would then walk around the room, addressing each man by his name from memory with some pleasantry or studied remark of congratulation, which might have a political connotation. He bowed slightly, but never shook hands. When he had rounded the circle, the president returned to his place before the mantel and stood until, at a signal from an aide, the guests went to him, one by one, bowed without saying anything, and left the room. Although the Oval Office was created out of the expansion of the West Wing in 1909, the room's distinctive shape was inspired by the Blue Room and its form may be traced to a formal social greeting that was meant by President Washington as a symbolic means of dramatizing the office of the presidency. Thank you for watching this video.